Okay, so we should now be live. Let's see. Good morning. Hi. Welcome to the Smarter Cities What Comes Next webinar with TRL Software. So it's Friday, the 24th of April. It's 12:30. What a beautiful day it is so far. So you've signed up. Welcome. Thank you for your interest. I hope you know what you're in for. So, quick bio about me. Hi, I'm Christopher Cattell. I've been with TRL for 10 years. I started off in the Middle East working road safety at the municipality over in Abu Dhabi. Upon my return to the UK, took up the role of operations manager and then progressed through to group manager before arriving in my final TRL form of chief technologist in the software team. European, citizen scientist father, technologist, breaker, maker, and fixer. And of course, all views are my own. I have a job description, unsurprisingly. Um, it's very much like others of this kind of role. But if you're to ask me, what do you actually do? I have one heck of a varied role. I dare say I actually really quite enjoy my job for a significant portion of the time. Enough about me, let's get into it. Um, what is a smart city? Well, definitions are galore, and we've got them right from government to large technology industry through to the British standards. MIT Press have some views to offer on that. But of course, definitions are tricky. Um, why are they tricky? Well, they represent a range of ambitions at the very least. I think some of those are relatively modest, and we will call them better cities, where they focus on things like basic sanitation, fresh water access, reliable power distribution, real-time traffic control systems, automatic penalty noticing and fining systems, and I'm not sure that's smarter or smart. I think that's just better. At the other end of the scale, we've got the dystopian cities, something that you would watch in a probably quite a good sci-fi film where everything's connected, everything is instrumented, it's surveillance by default, it's the panopticon of smart. Is that really a smarter city? It's not somewhere that I would want to live. You might. It's not for me. Um, I think a smart city is all about connected. Everything is for a reason. The why is answered. But where I then deviate from the tow line, let's say, is we can't keep doing things as we've always done them or doing things as they've always been done. Better, smarter, but I think it also needs to be done differently. Just so I haven't forgot it, there's also that little slice of the Internet of Things, that Internet of other people's stuff, be that your smartwatch, right down to your home hub. Um, yeah, I'm personally not a big fan, but that's me. Let's go into some examples, but actually I'm not going to give you any because when you look at what is a smart city, where are the smart cities in the world? I don't think you can say really there are actually any truly 100% smart or smarter cities. There are extremes. There's some really bad examples, and there's some urban areas that have some really good examples of what they've done. Um, if you do want to read about something that's really fascinating, I've followed for a few years, it's what they've done on the Hong Kong Metro. It's called Boss AI. Don't let that put you off. Have a read. It's really, really interesting and highly relevant. So, you need to be able to join all of these things up. And I think that's where a lot of the efforts today are actually lacking. It's about taking and having that actionable insight, that link between the data and the value in its use. It's all very well to go, haha, we will have all of the data belongs to us, and what more can you give us? Because we might be able to do something with it in future. Um, Evidence-based policy and decision making, wouldn't that be a thing? you need to remember the old adage about rubbish in, rubbish out, just as you would have for your economics model, just as you would have for positioning yourself from a debating point, or even your traffic model. If it's rubbish in, it's rubbish out, or as I like to remember it, the golden object resting on the pillow. You can only do so much with polishing. So there was a number given about 2 years ago talking about how much data will be generated by connected and autonomous vehicles. And it was in the range of 2 to 3 terabytes worth of data per vehicle of interest per day. That felt like an awful lot of data. And then earlier this week, I read that more data has been produced, captured, and stored in the last 2 years than there has been since the earliest memories were being captured. Does it tell us that we're doing things better, or does it tell us that we're just trying to get all the datas? Well, there's that adage that I've had chucked around, not by myself. I would not do such things. What gets measured gets managed. That's attributed back to the dysfunctional consequences of performance measurement from the Administrative Science Quarterly back in 1956. And so when being given the challenge, well, how do you know how you're doing if you don't measure it? Well, unfortunately, that doesn't actually include the full context. And that's about, even when it's pointless to measure and manage it, it harms the purpose of the organization to do so. What am I saying? Well, start with why. Why do you need a particular sort of information? How will you use that? And starting with why, and then flowing through, is actually a really good approach to take, in my view. So I think we can generally distill the direction of things as being, at the moment, all about the data. The big data, the data breach, data analytics, open data, big fan. Data lakes, data silos, data washing. There's a whole medley. And of course, Mr. Data. You might see there's a theme there, and yes, it's data. Volume, how much? Variety. What different types do you have? Velocity, how often? Value. How can we make use of it? And that's often a forgotten one, and very much pins back to why. Or you can look at it from the where, what, how much, when, and of course, why. That's today. In future, I think that's going to be different. It's going to be about we've had all of your data, we now have these trained models. We will only need to look at a subset of the data now to be able to do things and make inferences and things. But that seems to be very much at present the home of the world's biggest advertising company, the personalization of targeted ads and the like. But let's move on. Little thought experiment in terms of, here I am in my office, and I've taken a look to say, what data can I get my hands on to understand somewhere? So we will begin with a where. I give you somewhere. The Environment Agency have published their LiDAR data sets, and there's a variety of different dates across those. And so we start with all the way back to the Earth with the digital surface model at a 50 centimeter resolution, published under the government's open government license. I think it's version 3 for this. We have somewhere, okay, so we have a view as to what the terrain looks like. Now we can add a bit more with the terrain model, and we can start to see some buildings are appearing. Okay, there's definitely some forms coming in just from the land masses themselves. Now, with additional data sources, let's take some OpenStreetMap data and pull out the building footprints. We've done that, but now we can take our digital elevation model and we can look at our building footprints, and we can then start to extract how high are our buildings, the heights of buildings, even down to the shape of building roofs. Really, 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 really important from an environmental perspective. Environmental perspective, you say, Chris, why is that? It was whilst we were doing a project with the European Space Agency, all around looking at Earth observation data, terrestrially sourced data, traffic control systems, and looking to model to see what better outcomes we could have in terms of improving traffic flow and minimizing emissions. That I was given some schooling on street canyons and the impact of building roof shapes in terms of, well, the dispersion and how wind and air masses move around them. Fascinating stuff. Again, a small tangent, but if you're interested, please do take a read. We know where the buildings are. What are they used for? Again, we can then start ploughing down through into our data. I'm starting to get a picture of somewhere, my place. And of course, we have a road network, the all-important transportation links. That's fine. We've brought that in. And we're now getting a bit more of a picture. There are a lot of bus stops that are in there, a lot of bus services. We understand where things are. There's an awful lot of additional highway inventory, right down from your bollards to your signs to your traffic lights, through to disused posts, lighting columns. There's lots there. Community citizen engagement, when somebody isn't very happy about something and puts something in. It's all from a where, why, what context, geospatially referenced, and it gets you a great picture. Further on the environment, what are your natural features within your area of interest? So we can look at land use, building heights, recreation space, how the transportation network links things up and together, down to what trees, what environmental stock that we have there. You start bringing it all together and you get, admittedly, it's not a bad looking map. But it's a static shot of a point in time. That's a good starting place because that gives you the context as to the where. But importantly, a urban environment, my somewhere, is more than just a where. It's got a what, there's the how much, the how often, the where from, the where tos. And when you then start looking into the dynamic data, that constantly changing data set that exists, but is unobtainable in its current form, you get to start to do something a bit more interesting. If I think back more than 10 years ago, looking at undertaking a county-wide annual review of their road safety performance, and it was one of the first times that I've been let loose in GIS, and I've been given the accident data. It's been pulled in very nicely. All of my queries have been run, and now I'm starting to look through at cluster sites and then attributes that exist with those, and some interesting trends that haven't been previously spotted before. Potentially there is a new action plan. There's some actionable insight that arose from taking, again, some static data sets, putting them together, having a look, running an analysis, validating that, having a robust scientific approach, and obtaining some insight. I rolled forward a few more years and different local authority that I was seconded into, and they were very fixated on looking at their emergency incident response plans. Large development that was going ahead, and they had started some major groundworks. And in doing so, they had discovered, I'm told, the mother of all unexploded Second World War German munitions, which also happened to be not too far from the main gas line. That's a bit of a problem. Taking what was learned from that and understanding how you can bring data together was a really powerful lesson in saying we can't keep doing things the same way that we've always done. There surely has to be a better way. You bring in the traffic flow data, where people need to get to and where they need to get from, what road space you have available, what modes you have available, when people travel, how you actually need things to work, what are your emergency vehicle response routes. That's just one way in which you can start to bring it all together, but that's the exception and not the norm. But all of this has just been a little desktop joint with some GIS. Again, this is relatively straightforward desktop application, and we've talked through. I hope there's been something interesting in this for you. It's not without challenges. We go all the way back to the very beginning where we were talking about what is a smart or a smarter city. I've spent the last 18 months or so working on the Smart Mobility Living Lab, and that has been a great opportunity to actually have some constant thinking time around the technology, the areas in which we're working. What does good look like? All the way back from a reference architecture, that initial light bulb moment of we need to build something, and that being contextualized against what are the user needs, what are the user requirements, what do we need it to do, how does it fit together, which matured through high level, low level design, and finally into implementation. Yeah, that's me just lurking there on that monitor when going through for some of it. There was an awful lot of coffee consumed, of course, whilst that was all going on. And from that, we shaped a playbook. We have our roadside infrastructure, everything that's in our data center, our control centers, our applications, and then the new technologies that we're all bringing to bear. And as they fit together, you have different layers that exist within this. We're talking about our day-to-day systems management, our need for an operations, but then of course the data science part of it. What's the point in having access to all of this incredible data if you're not going to do anything with it? This all stacks up and gives you a great picture about how you shape and form a data and analytics playbook. But this is just in the context of what we're doing for the Smart Mobility Living Lab. And my God, has it been one heck of an undertaking. And we're dealing with 25 kilometres of streets across the testbed area in London. Doing it at a city scale, wow, that is truly going to be a multidisciplinary, multi-agency. Let's get everybody engaged and see what happens. But obviously with a plan. Okay, so people don't like this slide, and I do, because when you talk about data analytics and the need to understand and contextualize and data silos, I know we're not together, and if we were, I would say, hey, have you got a secret collection of Excel workbooks or CSV files somewhere, maybe even on your desktop in a folder called, I don't know, mine's called cleanup. No, that's not how we should do it. It's bad practice. It's keeping data to yourself. It's going to age. It's not organized or structured, and certainly isn't how it should be used as a tool in the context of what we're talking about here. Time and a place for everything. So what comes next, really? So we've talked about the understanding what makes the fabric of the urban scene, and you look at that at a fairly high level view. And as you then start to zoom in and understand what you've got, it then becomes more about the what space you have. What are your street cross sections? What do they look like? What do you have available between building line to building line? How much of that space is allocated to cars, bus lanes, footways, cycleways? What kind of frontages do you have? How accessible is it? How permeable can people move and through? And so when you boil it down, and credit to StreetMix for the graphics, great website, predominantly American focused, do take a look. But going back, people, services, good. The what, where, how much, when, and why. Always why. And you start to get a city puzzle. You've got the big overarching pieces about infrastructure and financial services and healthcare that fit within there. But at a local, national level, government, industry, retail, housing, utilities, transport, and how it all fits together. So we're talking about What does a smarter city look like? What does the future hold? To reiterate, I think it's connected, everything for a reason. The why you're doing something is answered. It's not as it's always been done or how it's always been done. Better, smarter, more joined up. It has a why. There's this thing called the hype cycle, and it looks at the passage of a technology through its acceptance, development, and introduction. And it all starts off with a technology trigger. And so here we are in our humble connected and autonomous vehicle, which, when I cast my mind back, I can remember reading. It may even have been the copy of the Focus magazine that had a big feature piece on Chernobyl, where I also got to discover exactly how a nuclear reactor worked, and that was a profoundly disappointing science moment for me. But it also talked about the future of transport, the connected car, what the future was going to look like, what was going to come in 1995, what was going to come in the year 2000, and that's come and gone. And so the visibility and the lead up to the peak of inflated expectations has been an awfully long time in coming. The future is connected and autonomous, and it's going to be great, but oh, hang on, it's harder and it's taking longer than we thought. Some future products seemingly will take a bit longer than the immediate future, it seems. This shouldn't be a big surprise. So you go from the peak of inflated expectations all of the way down to the trough of disillusionment. But when you hear about smart cities and you hear about connected and autonomous vehicles, what I hear is autonomous vehicles, autonomous vehicles, autonomous vehicles as the be-all and the end-all. I hear less emphasis on the connected piece. I hear less about the other people that move and make up the heartbeat of an urban area. It's residents, it's visitors, the people that work there, the people that walk their dogs there. Where do they fit into the mix? Because they absolutely must. Where does connected fit into the mix? Because seemingly it's a connected world that we're rapidly sort of throwing ourselves and heading towards and into. There are a number of global Internet of Thing type forums that generally position that IoT and a connected smart city needs three things. Firstly, you've got your hardware layer, which is where everything is telemetried, remotely sensed, and monitored. You've then got your data transformation layer, where all of the data comes out, all of your telemetry is captured, and then finally your applications layer, where you have your mobile app developers, the people that do great and fun things on your mobile phone or for your computer or your corporate or enterprise systems. And it all gets pulled together. Conversely, you've got those that will then sit down and talk to you about the OSI model and its 7 layers and how exciting that is, and how your city and the everything else in between can be made smart by following this. But the problem I have with that is I think it's missing a layer, and that's the 8th layer, and that needs to be the human-centric part. And a lot of that drives, again, why are we doing things? So, nice corporate slide for you on global megatrends. Societal changes, safety in the environment, connectivity and automation. There's lots going on. I actually yesterday, when doing my dry run to my 8-year-old son and my 2 dogs, apparently, Daddy, you shouldn't talk to people this long. That really wasn't very interesting. The dogs disagreed. I had constant tail wagging, so I will take that. I hope you're finding this interesting yourselves, of course. In my preparation, the reading up and through, I was truly aghast to read a United Nations global population forecast. Now, God, you go back a few years and it was teetering around the 7 or so billion people in the world. It's now forecast that based upon current population growth rates, that by 2050 we will have reached a global population of 10 billion people. Let that sink in. That is a massive increase. And so with that, you have greater call and demand on access to goods, services, raw materials, power, water, everything else. That has such a significant bearing on everything, and again drives home the point that when looking at an urban area, a city, a region, I think there are very few places where you can point and say, this is a good example of joined up thinking. This shows where we have a level of connectivity which not only services the societal frameworks needs, so the world continues to turn, people continue to work, money continues to be earned and spent, the economy is driven, people have families, they grow, things happen. It's all interconnected. That's systems approach. And so the societal changes that we need to see, that we will see, I think, whether we like it or not, our environment, even down to our health, all have a bearing on this. I don't think a smarter city is a thing that any single organization can lay claim to having built. It's this fantastic collection of compatible working organizations, partnerships, relationships, interactions where outcomes are achieved. I guess I could just talk very quickly on the collaboration dimension to this. I've got a piece which is coming up in Trade Magazine in possibly now, maybe in a few weeks' time, which is all very much based around collaboration. And my God, is collaboration and innovation in collaboration hard work? It's even harder where it's firstly against a commercial backdrop, and then even harder still where you have a number of different teams which all have their own organizational interests. When you talk about accessing innovation, there was an event a couple of months back about enabling local authorities to access innovation. Accessing innovation or being able to innovate themselves? I think that is actually a reasonable challenge. It doesn't need to be hard. It's not impossible, and it is okay to fail. Possibly less so where we're talking about public purse, but you shouldn't be afraid of having failures within things. If you don't learn from where things have failed, where they've not gone quite as well as they ought to have done, you failed. Your learning is the key takeaway from that. But I have lots I could say on innovation and lots of personal experience that I could draw upon. But again, I digress. I do apologize. So let's just have a quick example of where something has been done. Let's call this evidence-based awesomeness. I'm all for talking about innovation. Yes, we are going to do. And the number of times that I've been disappointed, but increasingly not surprised. I read about something, some type of innovation, someone publishes a paper. It's very, very exciting. Great. I can't wait to see what happens. And then I see nothing else about it. And there's this more talking about how actually it wasn't really progressed and nothing really came to pass. Or actually that 30% improvement wasn't based on a robust scientific method or indeed reproducible. A good example of having some data. So You are in a urban area and you have lots of cars. So many cars, all the cars. Sorry. And with that, you have a need to coordinate how those cars progress through your network. Real-time adaptive traffic control is typically how that has been done. And then you have your poor pedestrians. You have those which are waiting to cross. They've pressed the button and they stood there. If only there were a way in which we could actually look at optimizing the network for more than just the cars. Well, we did that. We did that 6 years ago. Pedestrian optimization within Scoot. So you take volumetric demand data from roadside. Yes, it does need some roadside detection. And this allows the length of the green man period to be optimized based on the demand. Fairly rudimentary in terms of the levels of priority that fit with this, but based upon observational and research follow-up, it just does what we need it to do. It's seemingly a small addition to a bigger system, but it's that consideration of a different class of road user. You have lots and lots and lots of different technologies being deployed. You have lots of existing technologies which are already roadside. In being able to understand your traffic, your demand, your flow, who's there, where are they going to and from. Here we are. Here is a picture of me watching myself in getting up one of our pilot sites in the Living Lab, set up one of our roadside cabinets, and so I took the opportunity to have a look at actually seeing what analytics could be run from the real-time streams that we had. So talking about processing running through. You have a camera view, you add some analytics. We can then start to look at trajectories of vehicles, speed, flow that starts to move through, and this is very, very localized. You talk about that localization a little bit further, it's like, okay, so we can now start doing some semantic segmentation of our views. Again, it's not particularly groundbreaking. There are lots of different people that are doing it, but it's the difference between, aha, we can do this. Here we have a perfectly positioned example, which isn't in the real world, as opposed to, there was Chris with a laptop in the rain under an umbrella running some experiments because he was waiting for his lift. It comes through, and we do this again and again. And so this all originally started off as what is the future of the road network? Transportation, what does connected, what does autonomous look like? For our test vehicles that we have, painful, I think, is part of the answer. I say that pretty much on the basis of the sort of data volumes that we're talking about. And they're not quite in the realms of 2 to 3 terabytes per vehicle per day. But where we're doing full dataset capture and we have resolutions from 1 right up to, I think it was 1,000 hertz, constantly streaming in and through the cameras, the LiDAR, the other onboard vehicle sensing capabilities that we're using. And that's just dealing with the vehicle. That's an awful lot of data. Where we look at these systems that sit around the vehicles themselves, they again produce an awful lot of data. The question, the trick, the real rub in all of that is going to be, how much is enough? What gives us our data set for enabling others to validate, verify, what does our good scientific method look like in this case? And so, just as from yesterday's webinar, I think you should have had Mike yesterday go through and run with TRL Scoot UTC, and one of the things that he mentions is inductive loops and the detection. And inductive loops in their various forms have been around for such a long time, and that hasn't changed. There are some alternatives. We have some above ground detection, we have radars, we have ways in which you can actually start using different forms of computer vision to extract, transform, learn, and do things from in a video perspective. And that's kind of the immediate short term. Here's where we kind of are at the moment. I don't think that's the be all and the end all of it. I think ultimately the panacea, or potentially the Pandora's box, is the I live 56 miles away from the TRL office. When I get up in the morning, I've got something set up so it will tell me of my three primary routes that I can take to work. Um, which of them is looking the most healthiest, if indeed any, and how long roughly is it going to take me if I was to go within the next half an hour or so. As part of that, I am querying some open data sets. I'm using some live traffic services, and I'm saying, I am here, I am going. Um, when you start to look at that on an individual level, and you build up a picture, a view of how people are moving, let's say cars, goods, services, deliveries, and everything else, individually, that's really quite personal. As you start to aggregate that up, you all of a sudden have a very clear picture as to what's happening in an urban area, what's happening on the interurban links that go through. And so, at what point does my car become a platform for the sensors? At what point do I have my future car, and as part of it, I have an end user license agreement and data sharing, and we'll have a good read of the fine prints around actually what data is shared and with whom and for why. Um, it's coming. It absolutely is, and that's the slightly further out, but not quite here yet part of it. In terms of my own role for roadmap inside of TRL Software, we have really at sort of three horizons. There's the what we're doing right now, and I hope you've found what has been talked about over the last 2 days to be really interesting, particularly in relation to the IMAP and the UTC side of things. I'm very excited about the UTC piece. Second horizon, what's coming up? And then finally, the third horizon, those which are a little bit further out, but where we're looking to see what's happening, what does good look like, what does the future hold. There's a bit of ball gazing. There's a bit of crystal ball gazing which is involved with this, and so we look to collaborate, and we look to the market, we look to the technology, and TRL has always been that great place where it opens a lot of doors, but equally so it enables an awful lot of conversations to take place. The did you knows, have you heard abouts, and so it's a continuous effort of learning, hearing, and digesting, and of new. So as part of my role, there are some really, really exciting things which are coming up, particularly in relation to this third horizon, and will be kicking off imminently. Watch this space around what we're doing. Yeah, we'll come back to that because I want to tell you more, but I'm not quite yet. So let's finally go into the problems. Smarter cities. So if something didn't have a problem, I would be really suspicious, deeply suspicious. I don't think I'm cynical. I think I have a healthy dose of cynicism. So you talk about smart cities, and we've got our better cities, our smarter cities, and then over here are panopticons, the future dystopian city. Um, you need to decide what that balance is between, is it surveillance or is it observation? And observation in an experimental or a data observing nature where it's about measurement, data collection, inference. I could talk for hours about the privacy elements and things that concern me as an individual, that concern me as a parent, that concern me as a citizen, as a person, as a human. part of the webinars is all really about looking at starting and having conversations. Um, let's have a conversation if you want to talk further. I know we've got some Q&A coming up. Um, let's see where that takes us. Um, Fitness apps. Oh yeah, your own personal GPS log. For the purposes of this call, I have taken my own smartwatch off. It obviously the battery's gone flat overnight. What do we see? We see a heat map of folk who have been running, and we can see where they really like to run and where we have our less run tracks. Taken in isolation, that's okay, fine. There's probably some tube animals that you could draw from that if you're familiar. If not, have a look. Um, there's a problem though. That's a military base in the Helmand province in Afghanistan, and some of those are actually off base. The other one I came across, which was absolutely brilliant, the lone cyclist within Area 51. Um, Again, it's at the extreme end of talking about some of the considerations that you have with this, but really, there's a lot to be thought about in it. There aren't all of the answers, and I don't think all of the questions have been asked quite yet. But the really important one is why. So, we should now be moving. Oh, we're having some audio difficulties, are we? Thank you, TRL Software channel. Hopefully, we no longer have audio difficulties. Almost made it, damn it. Um, how well is government funding this and where? Um, there are a variety of funding sources which come into play through either funding competitions, innovation loans. You see this through places such as CCAV, the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles. Likewise, with the number of things that you see coming out and via Innovate. There's also a growing industry level of.
Oh, we're having some audio difficulties, are we?
With this.
Thank you, TRL Software channel. Hopefully, we no longer have audio difficulties. Almost made it, damn it.
Okay. Any more for any more? What do I see as the favoured method of vehicle detection in the smart city? So when you talk about detection, that is very much around at a particular point in a particular time, and there are all sorts of constraints, limitations based around the data that you're going to get from that. I think actually the emphasis on the local authorities, those that actually are building and maintaining the infrastructure, sooner rather than later actually starts to begin to fall away. And why not source that vehicle from the vehicles themselves? Seems to be an issue with audio. Quick check. Back office poke. No, apparently audio is okay. We've got about a 30-second lag between messaging and bits. We now know this. Great. So yeah, uh, so for me in the morning, I'll get in my car. But before I do so, my phone's queried a couple of different places, and it says, "Aha, here is a good um, option journey time. What it looks like." You take that from an individual and you scale that up across people in their morning commute, the school run, your delivery vehicles, and how that all stacks up together. And origin, destination, matrices, real time, it's dynamic, they're updating. How that can then be used in terms of forecasting, well, I think that makes it less of a dark art than it has been previously. Thank you, Nick. Okay, so unless there is any more for any more, just over to here. No, brilliant. Thank you for your time.